Hey everyone, Steve Monette here. Welcome to another video in my Bible Prophecy Bite series, where we look at Bible prophecy, history, and current events that point to the soon return of Jesus Christ. So for today's video, I want to talk about a subject that has been on my mind for a few months. It was something that I tried making a video of in the past, but it never really gained any traction. But the subject seems to have gained a lot of interest lately, and I think it really does point to something prophetic, and I think it's worth doing another video on. And the topic is this: does the Bible actually tell us mathematically and the season of Jesus' return? And I believe the answer is yes. And in a moment, I'm going to show you where in the Bible it tells us this. But sadly, most people are not even aware of this biblical evidence, simply because the evangelical community, which I'm a part of, by the way, has had it drilled into their heads that the rapture is going to be some sort of a stealth event that could happen at any second without any warning whatsoever. And we've been hearing this for decades, if not centuries. But the truth of the matter is this: the Bible does not state that the rapture is going to be a stealth event or warning-less event of any sort. In fact, quite the opposite. In fact, if this were true, and as I like to tell people in my Bible studies, if this were true, then Scripture would confirm Scripture. But instead, we have no less than 5 verses in the Bible which prove that the rapture is going to be an event that occurs with ample warning and with lots of noise, so that many of God's children will be saved from His wrath. And I'm going to show these verses here on a pop-up screen, and you can study these at your leisure. In the interest of time, we're not going to cover them all today. So let's get to the question at hand. Does the Bible tell us when Jesus will return for His church? And as many of you know, the prophecy of Daniel 9:24-27, better known as the 70 weeks prophecy, clearly predicted the first coming of Jesus Christ. Well, in approximately 500 BC, the angel Gabriel appears before Daniel and tells him that in 483 years have been determined until Israel will see the Messiah, who will then bring them into everlasting righteousness and put an end to all sin. Well, this period of time is set to begin after a decree to rebuild Jerusalem had been issued. The angel goes on to describe this time frame as being divided into 2 periods. The first being 49 years, and then the second being 434 years, altogether totaling 483 years that would pass from that issuing of the decree to rebuild Jerusalem until the appearance of Messiah. Well, history proved that a decree was issued by the Babylonian king Artaxerxes in 457 BC. Now, 483 years later, in 27 AD, Jesus shows up on the scene and is baptized and begins his ministry. Well, not only was this prophecy fulfilled, it was fulfilled with precision timing. And as if that wasn't enough, the rest of the prophecy that predicted the death of Jesus, the new covenant, the end of temple sacrifices, and the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple were all done by the Roman army and were all filled with exact precision. But because the Jewish people rejected Jesus as their Messiah, many parts of the prophecy remain unfulfilled to this day. And the parts that remain unfulfilled are putting an end to sin and bringing in everlasting righteousness and sealing up or putting an end to all prophecy and vision. And those parts can only happen when Jesus returns. So how does Daniel's 70 weeks apply to us today? Well, I'm sure many of you have heard this. A theory developed by scholars say a prophetic time gap of some unknown years is added to the end of the 69 weeks that occurred in 27 AD. And then this time gap will start up again at some point unknown into the future, and then the final 70th week of Daniel will start. And that will be the beginning of the so-called Great Tribulation period. Well, that's not what the text says. Not by any stretch of the imagination. And it really drives me crazy to hear pastors teach this stuff. Because this idea of inserting a prophetic time gap of unknown length is a man-made construct, plain and simple. In fact, I used to argue this very point with my own father many years ago. And it's not some harebrained idea that I just came up with. Read the text yourself. Don't take my word for it. Don't take a scholar's word for it. Read the text yourself and see where you can find an unknown so-called length of time prophetic time gap. It's not there. It's just not there. No matter how you look at it, it's just not there. And then other scholars will try and tell you that there was a 360-day year for Daniel's 70 weeks. Well, guess what? That doesn't work either. No matter how you look at it, it takes 365.25 days for the earth to revolve around the sun. And that's a full year. That's from spring equinox to spring equinox. And if you disagree with me on that, take it up with God. He's the one that set the earth in motion, not me. But those are just the facts on the ground. Anything less is a man-made construct, so keep that in mind, okay? So, if there is no so-called prophetic time gap, then how do we make sense of Daniel's 70 weeks prophecy? Well, the answer is extremely simple. All we need to do is go back and look at history, and it will tell you all that you need to know. We all know about the first decree to rebuild Jerusalem. But did you know that there was a second decree to rebuild Jerusalem that was given after Jesus had ascended into heaven? Yep, that's right. There was a second decree to rebuild Jerusalem. And that could potentially mean that God has restarted the prophecy right from the very beginning. So let's look at history. History tells us that in 1535 AD, a Muslim ruler by the name of Suleiman the Magnificent issued a decree to rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, its water delivery system, and the Dome of the Rock. And this construction project lasted several years. And the walls and the water fountains are still standing today. And they all have Arabic inscriptions in them that tell us the date of their completion. And as I said, this project started in 1535 and it ended in 1542. Now here is where it gets really interesting. If we add Daniel's 434 years, or 62 weeks, to the year 1535, that brings us to 1969. And in that very year, on April 1st, 1969, in the Jewish month of Nisan, the Israeli Knesset issued another decree with funding to rebuild the old city of Jerusalem, since it had been destroyed during the 1967 war with Jordan. If we then add the final 49 years, or 7 weeks, of Daniel's prophecy to April 1st, 1969, we land in April 2018. So if you put it all together, if we add Daniel's 483 years to the beginning of that second decree to rebuild Jerusalem in 1535, that brings us to April of 2018. So what does this mean? What it means is that if I'm right about this prophecy, then we, at this very moment in time, are currently in the 69th week of the prophecy. And the 69th week will end in April of this year, 2019, or the month of Nisan. And here's another interesting fact for you. We know that the Israeli Knesset issued a decree with funding to rebuild the old city of Jerusalem in April of 69. That was Passover Eve, the month of Nisan. But did you also know that Artaxerxes also issued his decree to rebuild Jerusalem in the month of Nisan as well. And you can find this in Ezra 7, verses 1 through 10. And if you understand the Hebrew calendar, Nisan is the first month of the year, and that marks the start of springtime, or a time of new beginnings. So no, I'm not date setting. All I'm doing is making a mathematical observation based on the Bible and history. Take it for what it's worth to you. I think it's worth something, and I think it's something that we need to look at. So my question to you is this. Do you think the apparent repeating decrees to rebuild Jerusalem are just a coincidence? Or do you believe that this could be telling us the approximate time of Jesus' return? Let me know what you think in the comments section. I've done a lot of study on this matter and have even photos of the walls in Jerusalem and the water fountains in Jerusalem and all of the Arabic dated inscriptions. So I look forward to your comments and for those that are scholarly as well. But for the other commentators out there, please don't try and tell me that the hour and the day knoweth no man. Yes, I've heard that, I've read that, and I believe that. And please don't try and tell me that a year is 360 days, because that's just not biblical. I'm sorry, it's just not biblical. So, well, let me close with this, guys. If you believe that Jesus will return soon, and the evidence would seem to prove that we are nearly out of time, then I would encourage you to spread the message of salvation to anyone you know that isn't saved. The time is very, very short, and the month of April of 2019 looks to be very, very interesting. There's a lot happening in that month, a lot. So it's something that we need to really look at. And this, the ending of this potential 69th week is one of those things that's happening in April of 2019. So take a look at it. Please leave me your comments. Tell me what you think. So if there be any questions, think and pray on these things. And may God bless you and keep you until that day. Thanks for watching.